Let's be honest, Ruto is a Western darling. The United Nations has announced that three of its most powerful agencies, the UN Women, the UNICEF, and the UNFPA, will be relocating their global headquarters from New York to Nairobi, Kenya by 2026. Now, on paper, this sounds like a historic win for Africa. They're calling it part of the UN at 80. And the reform agenda saying it's about decentralization, efficiency, and putting decision making closer to the people most affected by the programs. Now, let's pause right there. Right, as a Black South African, I'm asking, is this really a win for Africa, or is it a strategic move to the West to tighten its grip on the continent through a government they know they can control? Now, here's what's official. Nairobi will join New York, Geneva, and Vienna as one of the only four UN headquarters cities worldwide. And the move will bring thousands of staff to Kenya and billions in economic benefits and make Nairobi a major diplomatic hub. UN agencies say that they will cut operational costs by 13 to 25% by moving to Africa.
Africa is a continent of hope, but it faces challenges that are deeply rooted in history and are exacerbated by climate change, conflict, and persistent poverty. And African women often bear the brunt of these hardships. Addressing these issues requires resolute action and renewed solidarity. Our global institutions were built at a time when most of Africa was under colonial rule. But unlike this hall with its 21st century innovations, many of these global institutions are stuck in those times, unable to respond to the aspirations and rights of the African people. Africa still has no permanent seat at the Security Council. Let's hope it will be corrected soon.
And also, the UN complex in Nairobi has already received $340 million compensation. Now, the relocation will happen in phases, UNFPA first in 2025, followed by UNICEF and UN Women. Now, on paper, this is historic, right? It puts Africa closer to the heart of decision-making on gender rights, child warfare, reproductive health, and humanitarian law. But scratch beneath the surface and things get complicated. Now, for decades, Africa has been receiving end-of policies made thousands of miles away, from IMF plans to Washington to UN development programs crafted in New York. Our continent has been treated as a case study and not a decision maker. So yes, the symbolism of having UN headquarters in Africa matters. It signals that Africa can no longer be ignored, but symbolism without sovereignty is just a window dressing. Now, let me remind you, the UN is not neutral. It has always been a tool of global power politics. It's blessed NATO's destruction of Libya. And when Africans demand justice for colonization, the UN sidesteps. So we must ask, why Kenya and why now? Now, I cannot celebrate this without asking the hard questions. First, Kenya under William Ruto is not some independent revolutionary state. Let's be honest, Ruto is a Western darling. He is regularly in the Washington, rubbing shoulders in Europe, pitching Kenya as the gateway of Africa for foreign investors. And if the UN truly wanted this move to empower Africa, why not Nigeria? The largest black nation on the earth, the cultural and economic powerhouse of the continent. Why not South Africa, right? With its long history of resistance, why not Ghana, right? Where Pan-Africanism was born under Nkrumah. Instead, they chose Kenya, strategically positioned, yes, but also politically convenient for the West. Let's not forget Kenya hosts AFRICOM operations. Kenya is a West frontline partner in counter-terrorism. And Kenya is already the testing ground for experimental policies pushed by the IMF and World Bank. So when I see the UN moving to Nairobi, I don't see progress, honestly. I see a consolidation of Africa's role as controlled laboratory for Western policy experiments. Now, the UN says it's moving to reduce costs. That's true. Salaries in Nairobi are cheaper than in New York. But think about that for a minute, right? They're saving money by relocating to Africa. Cool. And once again, Africa is positioned as the cheap option. The emerging markets where costs are lower, regulations are weaker, and government is easier to manage, right? When the West says emerging markets, what they really mean is a place where they can set the rules without resistance. The UN relocation will pour billions into Kenya's economy, hotels, transport, real estate, law firms, but will it transform Africa's power in decision making? Will it simply create another bubble of elites in Nairobi and disconnect it from ordinary Africans and serving global interests instead of African liberation? I mean, yes, right? On one hand, Africans will be closer to the UN's global decision making processes. Law schools, NGOs, and local civil society did get internships and contracts. But on the other hand, the biggest decisions are still made in New York, in Washington, in London, and in Paris. The veto power still belongs to the US, to Britain, to France, to Russia, to China. Africa will still not have permanent representation on the UN Security Council, and that's just facts. So forgive me if I don't jump up and celebrate, because moving offices to Nairobi does not change the power imbalance baked in the UN system. And it would be put it, if this is really about justice, they would have put the UN headquarters in Lagos, in Johannesburg, in Accra, right? But no, they chose Kenya because they know that Ruto will not challenge the West. He's too busy playing the role of Africa's salesman and opening doors for foreign investors, while ordinary Kenyans struggle under IMF loans and rising living costs. This is not decolonization. This is relocation, and it's a difference, a huge one. We must not be fooled. The United Nations is not moving to Africa for our benefit. It is moving to Africa for its own survival and cost cutting. And yes, we can use this moment to demand more greater African representation, more voices in global governance, more influence in policy making, right? But if we sit back and simply clap, we will once again find ourselves used. The real United States of Africa will not be born in a UN conference room in Nairobi. It will be born when Africans unite under their own terms, with their own institutions and their own currency and their own destiny. So yes, the headlines say this is a historic win, but let us not confuse geography with power. The UN moving to Nairobi changes the scenery, yes, but the script, the same old script of Western dominance, remains intact. Africa's liberation will not be outsourced to the UN, it will be built by us, on African soil, for African people. Now, I'm Naledi Mfoloe, and this is ADNC. I really want to hear what your thoughts are on this. Let's continue the conversation in the comment section. And while you're at it, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. That's it from me. Till we meet again, it is bye-bye for now.